Hello everyone, welcome to episode 25 of Reconstructing Cave Story. In this episode we're going to be working on the player health, and not only are we going to be keeping track of it in game, we're also going to be keeping track of it visually so that we can see how our health is being updated in our little HUD. So we're just going to do a lot of refinements to our HUD mostly, and then introduce a new unit for hit points. And as a bonus, we're going to add some more visual indicators for damage. These are actually in the game, so it's not really a bonus so much as it's more that we're going to do in this episode. So let's talk about our solution. Our solution is going to be just a struct health, and it's going to be an inner class of the player, just because nobody else needs to know about this struct health. But what I'm going to do, and this is, I don't know if this is interesting or not, I'm going to make another CC file for our player health. So just to keep all of the constants clear from our player class, because it's starting to get pretty cluttered. So this is just one way to keep it from getting too overwhelming. So for our health class, we're going to need a max health, which is going to increase as you get life capsules, and a current health, which is just going to be, you know, what's increasing or decreasing as you get hit by enemies or collect hearts. And the other thing we're going to need, and this is for the bonus part of it, is a damage time. And this is to keep track of how long until our damage actually kind of takes effect and looks different. So if you ever watch or if you play through the game, you'll notice that about halfway through the invincibility, your damage actually changes, but the first half of the invincibility, there's just this white fill bar covering the area of damage you've taken. So that's what we are going to use this damage time for. And then also we're going to move our HUD sprites into this health struct, as well as the new damage fill sprite, which is just going to be a white bar covering the area that we got damaged. So a couple of things we'll need to implement. One is a varying width sprite, and this is just going to be a sprite with a set width modifier to it, and this is just because our fill bars need to change width. So I'll get into this subproblem a little bit later into the episode. So let's start by putting all of our sprites into a private inner class in our player class. So I'll go into player.h, and down here below our sprite state, I'll create a new sprite, just kidding, a new struct called health. And this is going to have all of these three sprites. And I'm actually going to not make them scoped pointers because there's no real reason to make them scoped pointers. We can just make them sprites and a number sprite. And I'm actually, since this number sprite is going to be changing pretty frequently, I'm going to get rid of this and do something different. So I'm going to get rid of this health number sprite. Okay, so those are the two changes I'm making. I'm making those private data, and then I'll make a constructor for health that takes in graphics so that we can initialize these, and then a draw method. So this will be void draw, and it'll just take in the graphics. The other thing I need to do is get rid of this const, because I'm going to do something. No, I'm not going to get rid of that yet. Sorry. Okay, so I'll open up player.cc and playerhealth.cc, which is going to be a new file. So I'll go to source, add new item, playerhealth.cc, and this is just going to include player.h. Okay, so now I'll go into player.cc and start moving stuff over into our playerhealth.cc file and our health subclass. Where's player CC? Okay, here we go. So the first thing we're going to need is all these HUD constants, so I'm going to grab those. Just grab all of them, because they're now all going to go into our player health. And I'm going to just wrap this around in a namespace. There's no reason to yet, so, but it's okay. It's just a convention to help make things clearer. Sometimes it's good to do conventional things. And here we get red markers where we need to move stuff. So instead of doing this, I need to create a health item, but I'll do that in a minute. So I'll get rid of the number sprite and then just move these over into our player health.cc and create a draw method. So this is going to be void player : health : draw, and it's going to be taking in a graphics. And the other thing is I made these on a stack, so it's going to be a dot instead of an arrow. Okay, so that's that. We're going to need to draw our health, so let's create a health item and then initialize it. So health member field below invincible. No, I'll do it up at the top, I guess, or how about above invincible? So health. And I need to initialize it too in our constructor. So that will just mean passing it in graphics. And a comma, not a semicolon. Anyway, so in draw HUD, we can change this to health.draw. What's it not like? Okay, so yeah, I'm going to get rid of this const. I haven't been super careful about my consts, and I think I'll take an episode to fix them up just so I have built a good system. But for now, I'm just going to get rid of the const around draw HUD. So where was I? In player CC, draw HUD. So that's happy now. And then there was the initialization, which we need to do in player.cc. So I'm going to do this in the constructor. So it'll be player health, taking in graphics, and then initializing. So I'll just move all this over. Except I'm going to get rid of the number sprite. Oh, I'm not going to get rid of it yet. I'm going to comment it out. So we need to make sure that this is being initialized correctly. So instead of dot reset, it's just going to be a constructor call. And a comma, and one last parenthesis. And one last parenthesis. So I'll make a const ksprite path while I'm here too. One was those. Okay, so now we are going to, I'm just going to build and run this, so I'll build. Just to make sure that everything is building properly and running, and we won't see our number because I got rid of that, but I'm just going to do it just to see and make sure that, yes, everything is still there. Now let's put our number back in, and I'm just going to do this by creating a stack variable, so graphics, and then we'll give him 6 health or whatever, it doesn't matter, with 2 padding, and actually we can use k padding, health, num, digits, that's it. And then we can just draw it on the spot, giving it graphics and an x and a y. This is why I didn't delete it over here in play.cc, so let's just move it over here and figure out where to draw it. No. Let me just... Oh yeah, so I have a k health number x and k health number y. Thankfully I made constant, so health number x and k health number y. It might be a little bit redundant to use the word health because we are in the player health.cc file, but I'm not really worried about it and I'm not going to change it right now. So I'm going to build and make sure that this is working so we see our 6 in the right spot, and indeed we do see it in the correct spot. Now it's time to actually keep track of our health, so I'm going to jump into our units class and create that new unit for HP. And I'm going to make it an integer. I don't know if it needs to be an unsigned int or an integer, but I'm just going to be safe and make it an int. And I'll just call it HP. Obviously it needs to be discrete. I don't think I need to write a comment for that. And then player.h, we need to store, what did I say we needed to store? We need max health and current health. So that's what we're going to do. We will declare and then initialize these units of HP, max health, and current health. So let's initialize these right above our sprites. And I'll initialize max health to 6 and current health to 6. And instead of using the number 6 down here, I'm going to use current health. And I'll bring the draw stuff down there so you can see it, and build and run just to make sure that we see a 6. And we still see a 6, so that's all good. So the next thing I want to add is a take damage method so that we can actually decrease our health. And it'll be a public method so that the player can call it. So I'm going to make it a bool. And it's a bool because I need to know whether or not we've taken too much damage, or we've died. So I'm going to have it return true if we've died. So returns true if we have died. So take damage, and it'll take an amount of damage, so units of HP, so damage. This will be a positive number. Obviously not const because we don't want to take positive, we want to affect our damage. So we need to also, no, we don't need to do anything else yet. So I'll jump over into our player health and fill this method out. And what's it? I'll just copy it. Player health, take damage. And I'm just going to do current health minus equals damage. And we will see what this looks like. Oh, I also need to return something, so I'm going to return false and just assume that we're not dying. The next thing we need to do is actually call this method. So inside of our take damage method in our player class, which is down here, where is it? I'll just search. Okay, so down here, I'm actually going to call our health.takeDamage right below invincible, our invincibility check.take damage, and I'll give it a damage for now. Later we're going to actually calculate it based on who we're colliding with and stuff like that. This is just for tests, so you just keep it simple until you're done testing stuff. So I'll build and run. So I'll just take 2 damage and just make sure that our number is decreasing like it should be. So here we have 6, and I'll walk over, and he jumps down to 4. That's perfect. Except our damage should be staying the same, and we should see some cool fill effects. So that's what we're going to work on next. This is the bonus section of the video. So there's actually a delay before any of this takes place, and this delay is K damage delay. Well, let's call it the K damage delay, and this is going to be half or 1500 milliseconds or so. So it just needs to be less than our invincibility time. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to store our damage amount. And if damage is 0, that means that we aren't taking any damage, so we don't draw anything differently. But Yeah, so there's a couple more variables I'm going to store. So let's start with damage. Damage. And I'm going to initialize this damage to 0. And the other thing we need is a damage timer, or damage time. And that goes in player H. So right below damage, I'll do damage time, and this will be in units of milliseconds. So that in here we can initialize it also to 0. Okay, so now let's implement this damage delay. So instead of just subtracting our current health here, we want to wait until a certain amount of time has passed before we update our current health. So instead of this, I'm going to just set damage to be equal to damage. So once our damage time, which I'm also going to be setting to 0 here. So once our damage time reaches our K damage delay, or 1500 milliseconds, then we can decrement our current health. So in order to do this, we also need to add in an update method. So I'll add this right above draw, and it'll take in an elapsed time. So I'll go to player health.cc, and above draw, I'll define update. And let's increment our damage time if we have some damage to apply. So we'll say if damage is greater than 0, then we need to increment our increment our damage time. And if our damage time is now greater than our K damage delay, first thing we need to do is decrement our current health by damage. And then we can set damage back to be equal 0 because we've applied our damage, so we no longer need to keep track of that damage. So let's see how this looks. I'll build and run. So let's see. So it's still 6, and then it's still 6, and it's not changing. And I wonder why it's not changing. It's probably because we're not actually updating our player health. So let's go to our player.cc and call health.update. And then this will work. Where's update? Here it is. So just, how about below invincible? Passing it in elapsed time. And we'll try building and running again. And I think it'll work this time. Still 6, still 6, 4, about halfway through. Okay, so it switches about halfway through, which is perfect and what we want. So now we need to work on our fill sprite and make that a varying width sprite. So I'm going to create a varying width sprite now, and I'll just create this in source, and it's just going to be a header file only, and it's just going to, don't do that, inherit from sprite. So new item, header file, varying width sprite.h. Header guards, I guess you could do pragma once for those of you who are tired of doing header guards, but I've already done too many like this. It doesn't make sense to switch now, so suck it. Okay, so this is going to just inherit from sprite. I don't need to put the public modifier here, but I am anyway, in case you're following along and using sprite or using classes. So I'll include sprite. And I'm actually going to open sprite because we need to call its constructor, and I just want to copy and paste that because it's going to be the exact same. So copy, and down here let's paste. So we'll just do varying width, and instead of that we'll do a sprite constructor, passing in graphics, file path, source x, source y, initial width, and height. Looks good. And then we're just going to add a single getter method or setter method called set width. So void set width, and it's going to take in units of pixel, and we'll set source rect.w equal to width. I'll call this width. All right. So now let's actually use these for our fill sprite inside of our player health. So I'll exit this. I'll keep that open in case it's not working. So in player.h, where we have a health bar sprite, that's fine, but for health fill sprite, I'm going to call this a varying width sprite, and I will include varying width sprites. And I'm going to build and run and make sure that everything is still in line. You'll notice I build and run quite frequently, and it's a lot easier to just build and run as you're going and catch mistakes early on. So everything's still together, so that's great. Player health.cc needs to actually vary this vary this health fill sprite. So here we get into our subproblem of needing to calculate how wide to make the health or fill damage. So I made this little graphic. It's very cute and ASCII, and this is our health bar right here. And the equal sign represents how much we need to fill it. That's as a percentage of our damage. So let's say our max health is 6 and our current health is 3. We need to fill it halfway. And we have this constant max fill width. And we need to figure out what this fill width is. And this is just a simple ratio. So if you divide both sides by max fill width in this equation, you get fill width is to max fill width as current health is to max health. So I just multiplied both sides by this max fill width, and we get a ratio, or that's we get our fill width. So pro tip, and this is important, we can and will think of this width as an offset from the left. So it's not just a fill width, but it is also how far from the left we are. So I'm going to make a function to do this because we need to use this for a few things, and it's going to be private because our max health is a private data. So I'll go to player.h, and it's going to be in terms of this max health, but I'll make a function called fill offset instead of fill width because it's an offset from the left, like I said. So this is going to be returning units of game. And why did it delete that? And it's going to be called fill offset, and it needs to take in a damage amount. So it's going to convert our damage into an offset. So units of HP. So how about health? And this can be const because it doesn't change anything. Not that we need it to be, but I will implement it. Make sure I copy it. Below take damage. Scope it in, player, health. And what did I say? It was return, let me just look again. Max fill width times current health divided by max health. So K max fill. That's not right. Let me look at it. Oh, we need to make another constant then. So we have this max fill width right here, but we don't have a constant for it because I was going to wait till this episode to do it. So let's do k max fill width and use it. This is what it's going to be equal to. Down here, this health fill sprite, we just created it equal to the max fill width. And we'll replace this. Okay, so down here, now we can use k max fill width times our health divided by our max health. Okay, so now let's change our width for our varying width sprite, and this is health fill sprite dot set width, and we want to set it to be in units of pixel, so we'll do a conversion from game to pixel, and we just want to do the new health after the damage takes place. So we'll do current health minus damage. So let's build and run to make sure that this works. And just to test it, as soon as we get to 3, we should have about, okay, so that's too far already. And I'm seeing that I actually forgot to call our fill offset, so I'll call fill offset. Now let's build and run. Gosh, I do all that hard work and I just forget to use it. So let's see how this, okay, there we go. That looks almost right. So he's down to 4, now he's down to 2, and let's just see if he goes down to 0. Sweet. So now we need one more bar in there, and that's the white bar to cover the actual damage we've taken. So for that, I'll show you this red bar is what we're using as a fill, and this white bar is what we're going to be using as the damage cover. So yeah, that's just one unit. I'm going to define where it is up here first because it'll be easier now than later. So K, we're going to call it K damage fill, and we aren't going to give it an X. No. It's going to be K damage fill, or damage source X. How about that? And that's going to be 0. And damage source Y is actually, ironically, units tile to game 2. That was just lucky. And our height is going to be a half tile. So now let's add this sprite, and it's going to be a varying width sprite like our health fill, so I'll just call it health or damage fill sprite. How about that? So now let's initialize it in our player health.cc down here below our fill sprite. I might just copy and paste. I guess I will. Okay. And damage source Y. Doesn't really matter how wide it is because we'll set it whenever we use it. And we need to change this to damage. We don't need to because it's the same, but we want to. Okay, so that's all good. We've got it set up. So now if we actually have damage, we can draw it. But if we don't have damage, then we don't want to draw it. So let's say if damage is greater than 0, we'll draw this damage. Damage, fill, sprite, dot draw, feeding it graphics. And now here we need to use our fill offset again to figure out where to draw it. So we're going to want to draw it at our current health, beginning at our current health minus damage. And our Y position is going to be K fill Y. K health fill Y. Okay, so that's for drawing it. Now we need to actually set the size too. And so the size of it is actually just going to be the width of the damage. So we can just say damage fill sprite dot set width in here where we're taking damage to be equal to the damage. And I think that might be it. Let me build and run just to see. Okay, so that's not right. It's not in the right position. That's because we need to also add in to our position our K health bar, or our K health fill X. So we'll draw there. So build and run again. Doesn't take as long to build after you've built it because everything's all built. See that? That looks good. Just covers up the damage area. Okay, great. This is almost all I wanted to do for this episode, except right here I'm using this tile and it just kind of bugged me, and it's OCD, I know, but I'm gonna change this to game and change this to, it's slightly more efficient, but I really don't think it matters. It's just bothering my OCD. So where we're using this source width, we can get rid of this or change this to game to pixel. And this is just for consistency's sake, not really important. Don't do this in your own code because it's a waste of time, is what I'm saying. And yet I'm making you guys watch this. Alright, so it still looks beautiful, and we're pretty much done with the health HUD. Yeah, thanks for watching and happy developing.